Hello. For my masterclass, I am making a chili Colorado. This is a good recipe that my family enjoys. All you gotta do is just take some beef, add some of these ingredients, and roast it in the crock pot for a while to make it all tender. I'll be going step by step. And for our ingredients, we need some cubed chuck roast. I have a package here. 10 dried chili pods that need to be de-seeded, salt and ground pepper, half cup flour to coat the beef, 2 tablespoons of minced garlic, 1 tablespoon of smoked paprika, 1 tablespoon chipotle chili powder, a tablespoon of dried oregano, and half of an onion. First up, we want to prepare our beef. Here we have some chuck roast, beef for stew, and we will be covering it in a salt and pepper and flour and mixing it up before we fry it in our pot. So now in our big bowl, we have our beef. We have our 1/4 cup of flour to coat the beef with, ground pepper, and salt. I'll be using iodized salt, that is all I have. So first, we're gonna pepper and salt our beef very generously. This is a lot of beef, so we gotta make sure that it's all covered. And then, I'm gonna salt it. Spread it around so it's easier to mix. And then I'm gonna sprinkle our flour over it so it's even easier to mix. Some people like to pour it off to one side and then it takes a little bit longer and it gets a little bit clumpy. But we're gonna mix it with our hands anyways to get it all broken up. So all I'm doing to mix the beef in this bowl, this is the biggest bowl I have. So I'm just picking it up and just tossing it around and trying to make sure that all of it is coated with the flour. So this process does take a little bit just to get it all coated, but it should be coated with the flour and the salt and pepper by the end of it. Now, after mixing, it should look something like this. It doesn't have to be completely, covered in flour. A lot of it's gonna dissolve and pale out, but it should look something like this. Definitely wash your hands before doing this, so you're being sanitary and your food is clean. So in our crock pot that we'll be using to slow cook the beef, I'll be adding some extra virgin olive oil, just enough to coat the pan a little bit. And this is where we'll be frying and searing our beef a little bit. So that way it has, gets that nice Maillard effect flavor from the searing, the caramelization of the beef. So now that our oil is heated up, smoking just a little bit, I'll be adding some of our beef so that way it can get nice and fried. This will only take a moment. I do have it on high because all we're trying to do is get a sear on the outside. It doesn't have to be on all the edges, on every single side of each cube of beef. It just has to be seared enough so that we get that flavor. So when we have this, we get that nice flavor coming out of the searing. Also, while cooking the beef in the same pot that we will be slow roasting it in, this also keeps the flavor that is left behind. The little bits and scraps of beef that get left behind, along with the oils, the fats and the juices that got, slightly rendered. You're keeping that flavor in there so So that way our, our product just turns out way more flavorful and we're really utilizing all the material that's given to us. So this is our first batch. I have a lot, so I'll probably be doing 2 more batches, but it should look something like this, with that nice caramelization color. That's what we want. Now these need a little bit more time, so I'm gonna let it sit just a little bit more. Okay, so our first batch is looking really good, so I'm gonna transfer it to our separate bowl. So that way we can start cooking the next batch of raw. So as you can see, there's a little bit of pink on the sides. You can still tell that it's raw, but that's okay, because all we're trying to do is get that nice caramelization on the outside. The second batch is looking good. We're gonna put that with the rest. We got our third batch in. Meanwhile, I'm gonna simply just chop this onion in half and peel off this brown skin. All we want is 1/2 of onion for this recipe. So there's 1/2 of our onion with the brown skin mostly peeled off and both of the ends cut. Now we're not dicing this because we're gonna be throwing this in a blender with the chilies, and that will help create our paste to then throw and let the beef simmer in for a little bit. Third batch is ready to be transferred to the bowl. Final batch of searing chuck roast. Our last batch is looking good. Got a nice sear on it. So we're gonna put it in the bowl. So now that all of our chuck roast has been seared and it's got that nice caramelization going, we're gonna turn off the heat on our stove just to let it cool down. That's all flavor. And we're gonna de-seed our guajillo chili pods. We're gonna de-seed them, chop off the stems, and then we're gonna throw these along with our onion into a blender. So the best way to de-seed our guajillo chili pods is to just cut the stems off with scissors and then cut it right down the center. These are dried, so just find a little opening and just cut a line horizontally across, and then you should be able to open it up and all the seeds are in there. You can just throw those in the garbage. If you want to save the seeds, you can. Sometimes my family does, but for this, we don't want our chili colorado to be too spicy. So after de-seeding our chili pods, they are free of most of their seeds. We are ready to blend all of this together. Now, you could use beef stock to go with the beef theme, but I'm just gonna use plain water. Right, before we blend this, we need to break down the chili pods because they're dried and also rehydrate them just a little bit. So we're gonna put them along with the onion into our crock pot and let it simmer for a little bit. So I added just enough water to cover the chili pods. It doesn't need to cover the onion all the way, but just enough to cover the chili pods. And if we want to later on, after blending, if the mixture is too thick, we can still add more water to it. So now that it is simmering, we're gonna let this sit for maybe 10 minutes simmering, maybe 5. Once these have softened a little bit more, and then we'll pop them into the blender to make our paste. So these have softened a little bit. They're nice and malleable now. So I'll be taking an immersion blender and blending all of this up in the pot. So after immersion blending for about 10 minutes, we have this paste consistency. This is how we want it to be. So it'll coat all the beef and just have that nice saucy flavor and texture that we want to put in our tacos. So we have our beef off to the side here, and we're gonna throw it in along with our spices, and we're gonna let it just slow cook add a little bit more water so that way all the beef is covered with this sauce. Let it simmer and let the beef tenderize and all the flavors just combine together. So here we're gonna add in our beef to our mixture. So that way it can get nice and tenderized in the sauce. So I've added in the beef and now on to our spices. Okay, so I've added in our garlic, our paprika, our chipotle chili powder, and oregano. So now I'm gonna let it simmer and let the meat tenderize and let all the flavors combine. So this is our chile colorado after 40 minutes. We've added a bay leaf just to add a little bit more flavor. And it's almost there. It's about halfway done. It needs to be about an hour and a half cooked in this pot until it can get nice and tender and the beef is nice and easy to chew. But the flavor's coming along. It smells really good. So be back in a little bit. And after an hour and a half, it should look like this. The meat should be tender, and we're letting the lid stay off so it reduces a little bit of the moisture because the liquid's very liquidy. And I've paired it with a simple coleslaw. So it should turn out something like this.